I'd like to do the moment of silence and pledge allegiance, led by our own city clerk of 40 years of being an employee here in the city, married to Janet, and what a wonderful job. I know all the past presidents will say who served with him how much easier and less sweat you have up in the seat with him beside you, guiding you all the way. The city residents here need to know and understand how lucky they are to have somebody who is so dedicated to the city, who runs that clerk's office so well. If you go in there as a candidate or if you go in there as a elected official, you are treated the same with respect, dignity, and his support in helping you move through the obstacles that you may come across. So I am pleased to have our own Tim Spanos, City Clerk, lead us. Thank you.
Well, Council, thank you for those wonderful comments, and 40 years is a long time, but I have a little longer to go, so. Good. But with that, we'll stand for a moment of silence. And now we'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Tim. Move approval of the record, Mr. President.
So move. All in favor? Any opposed? There's a vote. Councilors, if I may, opening meeting law statement. This meeting is being televised live by cable channel 9 and is being taped by Peabody Access TV. We are also being recorded by our city council stenographer. At this time, councilors, if you would, I'd like to take it out of order just a little bit. We do have one group here looking for a hearing and license. I think is going to be very short. One on the agenda before them may take a little bit of time. So if there's no objections, if we can take it out of order. Seeing none, can we go to hearing A, please? Notice, please.
Okay. Notice is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Peabody will conduct a public hearing on Thursday evening, May 10th, 2018, at 7:30 p.m. in the Frank I. Wigan Auditorium, City Hall, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., on the application from Rebel Restaurants, Inc., DBA Tony C's Sports Bar and Grill, 210 Andover Street, Peabody, Mass., requesting an entertainment license, specifically television, CD, and DVD player, electric jukebox, and digital internet music at said 210 Andover Street, Peabody, Mass. Peabody City Council, Councilor Edward R. Charast, City Council President.
Would the petitioner please state your name and address for the record and what you're looking for?
Anne Marie Jonine of Sullivan and McDermott, representing Rebel Restaurants, Inc., DBA Tony C's Sports Bar and Grill. With me is Christopher London, the manager of the restaurant. So this, like you said, it's a new restaurant that just went into the North Shore Mall. It's named Tony C's after Tony Conigliaro. It's a sports-themed restaurant, so we're seeking a non-live entertainment license, just really figuring TV screens that line the walls that show various sporting events.
Councilor Gravel, will you take my spot?
How you doing?
You've heard the petitioner here. Is there anybody here to speak in favor of the petition? Anybody here looking to speak in favor of the position? Anybody here in favor? Is there anybody here looking to speak in opposition to the petition? Anybody here looking to speak in opposition? In opposition? Hearing none, Councilor Trest.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for coming, and I know we've been by there looking at this. It's been well attended. Welcome to the city. I hope you make yourself part of the city and the community. It's a great place, as well as the North Shore Mall. I have no further questions. I open it up to the council.
Any councilors have any questions? Being none, Council Trust.
Yes, I'd like to close the public hearing.
You've heard the motion to close the public hearing. All in favor? Any opposed? Vote.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move the, it's a little different over this side again. I'd like to move for the approval of the Rebel Restaurant Incorporated DBA doing business as Tony C. Sports Bar and Grill, 210 Andover Street, Peabody, Mass. Requesting an entertainment license specifically for TV, CD, DVD players, electric jukebox, and digital internet music. That's set at 210 Andover Street, Peabody. I move to follow the, to grant the petitioner.
Folks, you've heard the motion by Council Trust. Any comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Sasla.
Yes.
Mitsoulas.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Rozignol.
Yes. Yes.
Bell.
Yes.
Gravel.
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Thank you.
Councilor Gravel?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, thank you very much for allowing the time on this agenda to hear a presentation by Mr. McGoldrick. And I had the opportunity to meet Mr. McGoldrick by telephone through a connection made by our city solicitor, Mr. Spazitsky, and we had a good chat on the phone. It came after the meeting that we had, our initial meeting on charter review. And as you will recall, there were several options that we could employ to look at the charter, and there were some great questions by the council. It happens to be that this firm is probably, they're represented out of UMass, and from my understanding, they're a public-private entity, but they have probably more experience in charter review and charter change than anybody else in the state. And so it was a great conversation about the different avenues that you could take and how you can take those avenues. And I thought it would be worth the time of the committee to hear as a whole what they have to offer and what their sense is about the road ahead and how we might want to look at that road ahead. So with that, I'm going to invite them to present to you. And again, this is right now at an informational level so that you have all the facts, and then we can talk more about it in subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Steve McGoldrick. I'm the director of the Edward J. Collins Jr. Center for Public Management in the McCormick Graduate School at UMass Boston. The center was established by the legislature in fiscal '09, so relatively new in comparison with other centers at UMass. But since then, we have worked in close to 250 municipalities and over 350 different projects, ranging from what we're here to talk about tonight, governance and charter work, but we also do executive recruitment, mostly for town managers, town administrators, and high-level department heads in municipal government. We do a lot of human resources administration work, and a lot of financial management work. So we have a broad spectrum of services that we provide, mainly to municipalities, but we also do some work for regional governments and for state agencies. So basically, we're a public consulting firm operating out of a public university. So any contracts between the university and and cities and towns are also exempt from the procurement law because it's a public-to-public transaction. So, so that's the brief intro for the Collins Center, and I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn Contreras, who has vast experience, about the same as I do. And she used to work for the state agency that kind of reviewed charter work, charters statewide for many, many years. And she's going to talk a little bit about charters generally and make a couple comments about Peabody's charter, and then we'll open it up to discussion. Thanks.
Come over here. Motion to receive the articles.
You heard the motion. All approve? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Oh, okay. Oh. Steve asked me to address generally the question of charters, why you have them, what the history is, and they are, first and foremost, a legal document. Your first charter is on file in the Secretary of State's office in the archives, which simply identifies the area and your actually parameters, your boundaries with other communities. That's what the Commonwealth gave as a charter back in those days. But now we have the Home Rule Amendment. A charter is your foundation for your legal status, but it also lays out all the fundamental features of your government: who's appointed, who's elected, what the terms are. We also address how you can organize departments, how your elections are organized, what citizen safeguard provisions you should have. These are all fundamental features that we would expect to see continue throughout the city's life, with modifications as we go along. But it's not like an ordinance where you change it as conditions change and as these survive administrations. Many administrations. We've had the Home Rule Amendment was adopted in 1966, which allowed communities to elect charter commissions to prepare charters. Some of those charters are still in effect. Some of them have only been slightly modified. Some have been changed a lot. But this was the Commonwealth's first effort to say, communities, you have some authority here and to make decisions about how you are governed, which, segueing into your 1916 charter, that was not available at that time. In 1916, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts told you what you could do, when you could do it, and how you could do it. It's highly prescribed, very little discretion, and what you have now with the Home Rule Amendment is a bit more discretion, a bit more opportunity to make choices that are appropriate for your community. And you don't need to use the Home Rule Charter process to do this. You can do it through a special act, just as your 1916 charter is a special act. And I know that there will be questions, so I'm not going to go on forever.
Councilors? Any questions? Councilor Gravel?
Yes, so one of the things that we had discussed on the phone was the fact that, when Mr. Spazinski had presented to us, there were basically a couple of avenues that we could follow. There was the long-term election avenue, which is charter commission, elected charter commission, and which seemed to have getting it on the ballot and all of that. It had a lot of tripwires in it in terms of being able to move forward. And then we discussed this different way of doing it. We also had discussed with the city solicitor that we could, modify certain language, but it would be restricted in terms of the modifications as to which language we could actually work with, and that there was this other option. And I found this other option to be kind of interesting from Steve's perspective, where a number of city and towns have offered. And could you explain that option to us in terms of how it works and how it's different from the elected charter commission?
Sure. Going the special act route is a lot more efficient, and you don't have to go through an election of a 9-member charter commission, and then they have 18 months, and there's all sorts of other things in the law that they have to comply with, but they have 18 months to do it. Generally, a special act charter is governed by an appointed committee. How that composition gets determined is up to you. But what we see normally is the mayor gets some appointments and the council gets some appointments, and they appoint prominent members of the community, or business leaders, nonprofit leaders, or whatever, however you want to constitute it. Generally 7 to 9 members, no more than 9. And they meet maybe 10, 12 times, and come up with a charter document that normally it's a piece of legislation that normally runs about 30 pages. It's complicated stuff, and we just provide the facilitation for that committee. And we'll come in with draft articles, and they'll be discussed, and then we'll come back with whatever to include whatever wants to be changed. But we know what you can do and what you can't do, so you don't go down a road and spend all sorts of time discussing an issue that you can't do anyway. So I mean, we spare that kind of a time waste of time. So I would say that in our list here, of charter projects we have done out of UMass, that probably roughly 50-50 are appointed or elected. The 2 that we're engaged in right now, in Lynn, in Methuen, are both appointed committees. So that's basically the avenue.
Yeah, and this committee brings that recommended charter to the council as a whole, and we'll be here to assist the council in their deliberations of what the final document will be that you'll submit to the state legislature.
Right. So it follows the regular home rule petition route that you've done many times. Just to go back to the 1916 document, that's that document, and then there's probably a series of, in some places we've seen hundreds of special acts that have amended the charter, and we haven't been able to. I haven't looked at Peabody, but maybe the city clerk knows how many special acts have been passed since 1916. But I'm sure there's a lot of them.
Yeah, and that's what I found to be attractive. I mean, we had some discussion the last time that we had the charter committee meeting about, the fact that we all recognize state law supersedes some of the local stuff. So, in some ways, in shapes and form, the local language or the local laws have kind of been. We're not guided by them, and that was clear. But in our discussions as well, I was able to hear, well, should you do this? If that's the case, is there any reason to do this? And can you kind of go over the reasons why you think Peabody should, take a hard look at their charter and go through a process, put themselves into this process so that it's we're revising the charter, or should we just sit back, relax, and let the state law dictate?
Well, the special act is the only way really to make the document yours and have it reflect what the people of Peabody want, or in the sense that if you want to just rely on state law, it's sort of like generic cereal, you know, the comes in one flavor, and that's what you get. This is a chance for you to sort of add fruit or something, so that you can make it responsive to what you believe the community needs. Also, what has happened with your 1916 document is the state law has sort of overtaken it. We've had the passage of the Home Rule Amendment. We've had a complete recodification of the election laws. We've had various changes just in terms of public safety that is a more operational issue, but does affect the responsibilities of the city. So what we would like to do, what the document does, it brings everything up to date, makes it current, and helps you move forward into the future with probably very minimal changes.
Just another comment on the special acts. I mean, we would have to go through every one of them to see which ones needed to be changed to conform with a new document, and which ones should just be repealed because they're obsolete. Just clean all that up. Just clean it all up.
The last comment I'll make is, you know, and then I'll leave it up to others, is that, you know, my sense in all of this is that, you know, it's a control document that, like any control document, it should be as clear as possible for the council, for the citizens. You know, I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've heard and have been asked, well, why is this way? And it's, well, it's because of the charter. And then, you know, you go into the charter, and anybody that's taken a tour of the charter, you know, you'll go into a section, and then there'll be amended by with inserts, but not with language. You have to go then look up the insert, and you have to see, has that insert been overwritten by some other insert, which has been overwritten by another insert, and it goes on and on. So to me, a general cleaning of the charter helps to bring everything into the century that we're in, and also helps to make it a clearer document for the council, this council and future councils to work from. It also, from my perspective, is you know, it gets a double stone on that one, because people aren't then going to read something that is offensive in language that because of the time of life that it was developed in. And the part that I liked about the description of the process that they were talking about is that you would have, say we chose a 9-member committee, you know, and the mayor would select, say, 5, and the council would select 4, or whatever the composite is that you would so agree to, then you've depoliticized the process because no elected official can participate. Whereas in the elected positions, elected official actually could run for office and run to be on a charter committee at the same time that they're holding office. So it was kind of an interesting way of, one, expediting a process so that we're not, you know, as some pointed out in the last meeting, not dragging out a process for years and years, putting ourselves into something that we don't want to be, but in the same way, getting the job done in terms of cleaning up the charter itself so that we have something that lives with us today that can be not only current thinking but future thinking, and can push forward to tomorrow. And that to me is the primary goal of any time you look at a charter review. Same thing with zoning ordinance reviews. You kind of want to reflect on where we are so that we know where we're going versus where we were, and not know why certain things were put in there or have a ready reference to them. So that was what I got out of the conversation when we engaged in. I thought it would, you know, as only one counselor, I thought it would be a good idea for all the councilors to hear what that option was and is. I mean, it's not free, obviously, they're paid for their services. But it's something that seems to be more in line with the way communities are going these days in terms of cleaning their charter, is by bringing in an outside source who guides the independent committee. Ultimately, the vote for anything that goes forward comes from the council, so if there's, there should be no concern that, there's something put in there that will be offensive to you that you have to accept. It's obvious, in the end, they present you with a document, you can accept the document. I don't know if it's in whole or in part, maybe they can fill us in on that. But it's a great way, I think, to get some resource into this, to really dig in behind the scenes, make sure we're not, that we're reflecting reality, that we're not redundant, that we're not overwritten, and that we have a good source document to move forward with. So with that, I'll leave it to the other councilors, and we'll go from there.
Councilor Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for the presentation. I had a few questions on this. Regarding the home rule petitions, and Councilor Gravel touched on this a little bit with some of the older language, or what do you consider offensive language that would be in there. Would that be something that we could just essentially identify and strike in one? Say for example, we just said, instead of, we didn't want to change anything particular to the functioning of government, but we wanted to update the language to reflect what, today's culture. Would that be something that we could do and simply strike it, go through a home rule petition, and just update the document?
I'm not sure what you mean by update. Each special act, each act that is now amending your charter would have to be repealed if it was no longer effective, if it was no longer what the city wanted. It's very difficult to sort of go in with a scalpel in a 1916 document and extract things and leave certain pieces in place. What we have is a term that sometimes you might hear is internal consistency, or all the language has to match in each section. Everything has to mean the same. And when it gets old like that, then we have problems with interpretation. It's really easier to move forward with the more clear language and the more consistent language throughout the document. And there's plenty of documents plenty of charters free to learn from and see how this is done. This is not, this is valuable to you going forward, just in terms of how it gets interpreted on a daily basis.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. I talked to some people I deal with in some of these cities and towns that have gone through some of these charters. I know Weymouth went from went from a town to a city. I have a few folks down there I've dealt with on their side. Are, for the most part, other than the specifics, what they would either special legislation or home rule petition specific to that community, are most charters, for example, a city, are they generally the same, other than like term limits and things like that? But in general, are they generally the same? Or is it, do you starting with like an outline and then say, well, we can specify here, we can specify there, but for
there are several articles that are fairly boilerplate. But the elected officials article, the elections article, in terms of whether you have preliminaries or not, whether you want recall or not, those are all choices that you'd have to be making. Some charters contain a complete description of each department. Others say that the council shall have the authority to, the mayor shall have the authority to present a code to the council that outlines an organizational plan. So there's some that are sort of tighter, some that are more flexible. So, and I accept your point. Yes, some of it is boilerplate, but and the whole financial section. Some of those are, we want almost everyone has a capital plan requirement, but looking at the budget calendar, the state provides a minimum. You can write something that is, you know, gives more time for deliberation, more time for public comment and public hearings, that kind of thing.
Thank you. Also, with regard to something touched on what Councilor Gravel said, who I agree with quite a bit on the appointment factor of having 9 individuals and then, you know, trying to keep it apolitical. But what in your experience, and this doesn't necessarily, we don't have to get into the specific mechanics of it because I know that that's judged by the way this is set up. But is there something, if we say it came to the council, so these 9 folks came forward and they said, here's our document. How would the council deal with certain aspects that say they didn't agree with? Instead of, I mean, essentially, do we have to take the document as a whole, or could we do similar to like the line item?
Yeah, the process I'm most familiar with is that you go through it article by article, and then you vote on whether you accept the provisions of the article. If we're making changes as we go along, then we need to continually be checking to make sure that we're not upsetting the internal consistency of the document. But that's the only process that I've seen.
Very good.
It's not somebody brings you a 30-page document that says up and down. No, we can go through it.
Yeah, and I think that just through you, Mr. President, was one of the really important pieces of advice I got from some folks out in Western Mass that went through this was, you know, this was over a long-term period, so views actually changed as they went through these line item by item. So by, you know, sometimes the consistency with the document wasn't the same six months later when they started, and you know, they saw the whole process and they said, well, we actually want to streamline government, where they were much more detailed in the beginning. So that's comforting to hear that, and that's something that you would bring to the table to make sure that the nature of the consistency was there.
Yeah, and we'd also, as I said earlier, we'd also, if an idea comes to the table and we know you can't do it, we might as well just say you can't do that. Then it just stops. That's one of the values that we bring. That an issue doesn't get talked about a lot that can't be done anyway. You know.
I appreciate your time on that. Thank you very much.
Councilor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much for coming, folks. Appreciate your help. Councilor Gravel and Councilor Melville asked some very good questions. I'm just going to be real brief. What is the typical time period that we retain your services and we have a document that is presented? How long does it take?
I would say 8 to 10 months.
Okay.
Depending on how many meetings this committee wants.
Well, the subcommittee, correct? Not the committee, not the body of the whole, right, Councilor Gravel?
No, I'm talking about the appointed committee.
Oh, the appointed,
Yeah,
excuse me.
yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
And the appointed committee makes recommendations that come back to us and we vote on it. Is there ever a issue where the voters, are there issues where the voters get to vote on particular items? The elected, the residents?
Yeah, the home rule petition will go to the legislature and presumably signed by the governor. And the legislature is going to require it to go on the ballot because it's a major, there'll be some major changes in there. If you change terms of office, if you change composition of bodies, all that stuff, the legislatures, although not constitutionally required to, they're very loath to not put something like this, force the city to put something like this on a ballot.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Is what?
The legislature will add at the end of the document that it won't take effect until voted on by the electorate.
By the voters of the city.
The voters of the city. So, you know, it's going to get a ballot vote no matter what.
In the arena of changes to charters, there was a motion started, or a motion we'll call it, where somebody got out and was getting signatures to change the length of term for the mayor's office, for instance, 2 or 3 years ago. That will not have to take place because we'll have a commission that will be in charge of that type of
Correct.
work? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most of my questions have been asked already and answered. Just to drill down a little bit further on one of the items. With respect to if we choose to go to the special act as opposed to the elected charter commission, would have up to nine appointed members who would bring back a document to this council. And now we've already established it's not an up or down vote, and you've established that you could change things. Can you add things? Well, if issues were not included in the document, the final document that the appointed council brings to the city council, can we have those discussions and add things in that weren't discussed? We can strike things, but can we add things that weren't discussed?
Yes.
A man of many words. I love that. Keep him.
That was a yes, no question.
Let's hire him right now. Excellent. And then I see on your list of charter projects, are these all the ones that you assisted in? Is that what the list is indicating?
Yes, those are all the charters that the municipality contracted with the universities to help them with.
Okay. And
Yeah.
is this like a mix of what each city and town chose to do? Did some choose elected charter commission and some appointed? Yes, so it's a mix. I see Melrose is not on here.
Melrose, I did Melrose, we did, she lives in Melrose. We did that when I worked for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, so I didn't do the Melrose Charter for the university. I did it for MAPC, when working in MAPC.
Yeah,
What did they choose?
That was 2005.
Thank you. Do you recall what they chose?
They had a mayor with a 4-year term. They kept a
I'm
council.
sorry. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Oh.
You've got a great memory to remember all that detail. But I mean, what did they opt? Did they opt for elected charter commission, or did they opt for the special?
Oh no, they had a working committee, and then the working committee brought its recommendations to the council. Then the council reviewed it. They did make some amendments before it went to the legislature.
Excellent. And then just to drive that point home, regardless of what we choose to do, it has to go out to the voters, whether we option for elected charter commission or the special act. It has to go out to the voters, correct?
The legislature usually does require, almost always requires a charter to go before the voters if you use the special act route.
Almost always.
Yeah.
So there's been incidences where they haven't?
Yeah.
And what would that, why would that have been? When did that occur?
I can remember 1989. It was a town. It was a town that was creating a town manager position. Really couldn't comment on why the legislature did what they did, but I do remember that.
And let's say that it goes to the legislature and they don't require it go out to the voters. Can we do that on our own to send it out to the voters?
I think you can, but would it be binding?
Yeah, I think you can. You can put that in the transition.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
we can put in the transition. There's a transition article that kind of lays out when everything kind of takes effect. So everything doesn't take effect on the same day. You gotta phase stuff in.
Okay, because that's really important, at least to me. That's my opinion. It's very important to me that be included and required. Should it not be required of the legislature for whatever reason, they've done it before. If that's the case, then that would be important to me, and just in moving forward that we require that. So thank you very much. You've been very helpful.
Yep.
Councilor Rosenau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. This has been extremely informative. Most of my questions have been asked, but I do have a couple others. The Charter Review Subcommittee, if you will, would that be an open meeting, and would the public have input at that particular stage during the process?
Although this is, it's not technically a governmental body, every appointed committee that we've ever assisted, the meetings have been posted and held in open session.
Perfect. And then just one last question is, how much would your service cost to help us in this transition?
I knew that question. Now, depending on the design of the, how many committee members there are and so forth and so on, the range for a charter of this complexity would run anywhere between 30 and 40,000.
Thank you.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had the meeting that was alluded to back in April of our subcommittee. The city solicitor advised us that there was a third option to make some minor changes to the charter that would only require a council vote, just some cleanup by edit. But there were going to be limits to what could be done. Is that accurate, or is that
Yes, that's always
not to draw into question the information from our city solicitor, but I know you have a lot of experience with dealing with communities on this. So,
it is always possible to go in and amend your existing document. I think that one of the issues that you have to look at is that your document is now so old that the efficacy of that is going to be very limited.
No, I understand there's construction issues around
Yeah.
internal consistency and so forth, but
Right, and
that
also,
that aside, we have the authority to do that to a limit, to an
Yes.
extent. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what are those limits? Can you provide at least some rough sense of what that? I mean, I know we can't do it with respect to the government bodies and the terms and so forth. But I
Right,
certainly
you couldn't make any change in the mayor or the council composition or term. It's school committee composition or term. You can't have recall. You can't add recall by local action. In order to repeal any special act, you have to have you have to take action at the same level. So you couldn't repeal a special act except with another special act, so you're still on your way to the legislature. You see what I'm saying?
I don't. Well,
Okay, if you wanted to-
I do hear what you're saying, but that contradicts
If you
what we were
wanted to
told.
amend a section so that you remove requirements or procedures that were established by a special act, you can't do that locally. If they were established by a special act of the legislature, only the legislature has to give you permission to repeal it.
Right. Well, let me just get. There's some language in the charter which I think most of us find objectionable with respect to women and so forth. I mean, using that as an example, can we change that by council vote without going to the legislature?
It would depend on where it appears. Certainly, if it relates to elections, all of the provisions almost every provision regarding elections, except whether or not you have preliminaries for local elections, is governed by state election law. So if there was a concern about what elections women could vote in or something, that's already been overtaken by state law, and you're under that. So it doesn't really matter what's in your charter per se, because you're under state law.
So that being the case, excuse me for interrupting, but that being the case, the answer is we can change that at the local level without involving the legislature. Am I hearing that correctly?
No.
We cannot. Okay, so the answer is we can only, it depends on where it appears.
Yeah.
Is the correct answer.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have the document in front of me, so I can't.
No, I understood. I'm not expecting you to be an expert on it.
I don't want to speculate.
Well, you've given me the answer, which is that it depends about in the context of where precisely where that language falls. And,
Right.
in some cases we could, in some cases we couldn't.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that hasn't come up in the discussion yet, but there are certain areas of state law that are exclusively reserved to the state. Elections is one of them. So We can give you an election article that better reflects the practices that are in place today. But like I said, really, the only choice you get to make is whether you have preliminary elections for mayor or council or school committee.
And just the last question, have you ever provided advice on kind of that limited kind of cleanup basis, or have you only engaged in the other two methods? Could you provide technical assistance on the types of changes that we could make locally based?
We could do, if that's the scope of services the city wants, we can do that. What we're doing right now in Lynn is similar. I mean, they want a report on their whole charter, and not to speak for Lynn, but once they see the report, they're probably going to want to do a full charter. But we can do a report on the existing one, if that's what.
Okay,
that's
so
what you want.
that alternative may exist if we
Yeah.
would. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could approximate price for the report that Lynn might be getting charged?
Let me think.
Rough estimate, I mean.
Okay. I think it was 10 or 15.
Okay.
Any other councilors? I only had one or two questions. How many people on staff do you have?
We have 3 full-time and about 35 part-time. And the part-timers do project work. So basically, they get paid if they have a project. There's only three people that they're on salary.
In your time frame to, if we were looking to ask for your assistance in any of the proposals, how long out are you before you would start?
We could get a scope of services to the city, within a week, and we could start right away. Upon contract execution, obviously. So I would suspect that the proposal would go to the council, but it would be the mayor that would need to sign the contract, I would suspect.
Thank you. Any other councilors? Councilor Gravello, would you like to end?
Yeah, I certainly, again, I want to say I appreciate all the advice and all the time that you spent. I think it's and I also understand that it's really going to be up to the mayor if he wants to put forth a budget for it. He would have to propose, and we would have to dispose of that based on the way our current charter exists. And so I guess we would wait to hear from him in a communication that he'd want to engage. The timing is kind of interesting because we'll be in budget, and I would assume if he was going to ask us to go forward with such a thing, that he would put it into the budget, that we would vote on it as a budget item. I, for one, see, as you just stated with Lynn, I think sometimes, I'm in the consulting business, and I know sometimes people pay twice for what they could have gotten once. They get a report and realize it's more difficult to use it, and then say, well, now I need you to help me fix it, and then we're going through the whole process and paying the second time for it. So I, for one, am interested in the first method, although I clearly, it was kind of interesting to hear that there is, some alternative there that might be a little less expensive. But I honestly believe this is one of those things that's, worth the value of whatever you do, because I just feel totally uncomfortable with the way it is, and there's no real good reference document there. We're always relying on somebody going and figuring out where we are. I just think it should be clear. I mean, I know we don't change the U.S. Constitution every day, but at least the language there is fairly clear, and it's not superseded by 15 additional local things that somebody decided to put in at a time. I I am going to tonight make a motion to request the mayor to weigh in on this and advise as to his desire to incorporate this into his budget. And if he's desirous of that, then I guess we can then vote on it as a council, either to support it or to take it out of the budget. So, but I do really appreciate. I mean, honestly, he spent probably a little over an hour plus on the phone just answering some pretty basic questions. I know sometimes that can be frustrating when you're an expert in the field, but I do appreciate you listening. So thank you very much for attending.
Counselor, you looking to make a motion now or that later?
I'll do it at motions, orders, and resolutions.
Thank you. Any other counselors? Well, thank you very much for coming. I'm sure you gave us a lot of information that we all need to kind of break down in our own heads, but I do appreciate you coming out and spending the time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be in Peabody.
Two minutes? 2-minute recess? Thank you, councilors. Move to reports of committee. Legal Affairs Committee. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. There was a meeting of the Legal Affairs Committee earlier this evening. Present at the committee were members, Councilors Gould, Gravel, Masulis, and O'Neill, and all other councilors were present. There were 2 items on the agenda. The first item was the mayor's recommendation to pursue a zoning amendment banning recreational marijuana business uses in the city. There were comments made by the mayor laying out his rationale for opposition to recreational marijuana. There were also comments provided by the general public on both sides of the issue, and that was followed by a healthy discourse on the issue by the committee. And the following motion by Councilor Gravel was made and supported unanimously. And in the interest of time, since I don't have that in front of me, I'm going to ask Councilor Gravel to read that motion.
The motion being made on behalf of Council McGinn is a motion to move under Section 1510 of the zoning ordinance to initiate an amendment to said zoning ordinance to ban recreational marijuana business uses in the city and incorporate by reference the exact language of the amendment approved by the Planning Board by its communication to this council dated November 8th, 2017, which the copy to be read is again, I apologize for a little technology glitch here. To recommend that the City Council adopt the proposed zoning amendment to the zoning ordinance under date of April 28, 2011, and amended through July 18, 2017, is hereby further amended as follows by repealing Section 6.14 entitled Temporary Moratorium on the Sale and Distribution of Recreational Marijuana and adding a new Section 6.14 as follows. 6.14, marijuana establishments forbidden. The operation of any marijuana establishment as defined in General Law C-94G, Section 1, including without limitation a marijuana cultivator, marijuana testing facility, marijuana product manufacturer, marijuana retailer, or any other type of licensed marijuana-related facility is prohibited in all zoning districts of the city. This prohibition shall not apply to the sale, distribution, or cultivation of marijuana for medical purposes licensed under Chapter 369 of the Acts of 2012. Section 2, all ordinance or parts of ordinances inconsistent herewith are hereby repealed. And Section 3, this ordinance shall take effect as approved by law. Further, in the motion to schedule a hearing upon same and through the clerk to properly advertise the amendment, and further require the city clerk to communicate this amendment to the planning board within 14 days of the vote hereon, so moved.
Heard the motion. On the motion, a roll call.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Sasla,
No.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Rozignol,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Gravel,
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 9-1, one absent.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second item on the agenda was a recent audit of dealerships, the Lemon Law Sticker audit. There were representatives from two of the dealerships that appeared to comment that had received letters. There was a motion from Councilor Gould, which was passed unanimously by the committee, and that motion was to adopt a recommendation from the Assistant City Solicitor in the communication dated May 10th, 2018. So moved.
You heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
That was it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Gravel. Finance Committee.
Yes, this evening there was a meeting of the Finance Committee. It was attended by myself as the chair, Councilor Gould, Councilor Manning Martin, Councilor McGinn, and Councilor Turco. All other councilors were present to participate. At the meeting, there was one agenda item. The agenda was a request from the mayor to have the city council authorize the use of up to $7 million of insurance proceeds relating to the Coolidge water treatment plant and the water treatment fire. $6 million for construction and rehabilitation of the Coolidge water treatment plant, and $1 million as partial payment towards our MWRA water obligation. This money will be allowed to be used as received from the insurance company. So moved.
Heard the motion? All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Need a roll call.
Roll call, please.
Councilors O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gould,
Yes.
Sasla,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Rozignol,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Melville,
Yes.
Gravel,
Yes.
Charist.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Thank you. No further items.
Move to reports, motion, orders, and resolutions. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under suspension of the rules, I move to receive items 8B, 8C, and 8D and set up special permit hearings for each. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor O'Neill.
Try to be brief, but I did want to just give a quick update regarding the issue we discussed last week at the last council meeting. City Council took a vote and decided to send a letter to the Linfield Planning Board and Board of Selectmen regarding our concerns about the Sagamore Golf Club redevelopment project in Linfield. I did attend the meeting on the April 30th and sat through all of it, but at the end, I'm pleased to report that the voters in the town meeting voted down Article 19 and turned back the other three articles to go back to the planning board. So while it's good news that this particular development failed, especially for the residents of Catherine Drive, there's no doubt that the owners of the golf course are going to revisit this project, as well as other alternatives at this site. So I just want to let people know, thank them for their, especially Councilor Rosignol's suggestion that we send the letter to the board and let our opinions be known. But we'll have to be vigilant to make sure that our city has a seat at the table as future projects at the site come forward, especially as they relate to Catherine Drive. Thanks. Nothing further.
Councilman McGinn.
Mr. Chairman? Thank you. Through you to Councilor O'Neill. Regarding the future project that you anticipate is ultimately coming, it's my understanding that the abutters did not get notice on Catherine Drive. So was it before their, and this is town government, so it's completely different than our city government. So I don't know the answer to this. That's why I'm posing it to you. If you know or if you can inquire. It's town government. I think it was it before their planning board portion of the town meeting? And if so, are they not required by planning board to notify abutters? Because I don't think we are with our planning board. If it's a planning board, if it's going to our planning board, Tim, correct if I'm wrong, we don't have to notify abutters, correct?
Correct. Planning board is obligated to hold a public hearing, but the only notice requirement is to the planning boards of the abutting cities and towns, not to actual residents.
Aha. So did our planning board get a notice of this from planning board to planning board?
I don't know, Counselor.
Okay.
I don't know.
Can, if I may, can we look into that, Tim? I'll make that as a motion when it comes around to me. That's good to know, because if there is a project coming, we need to make sure that the residents that are abutters on Catherine Drive get a notification. And if it's not required of Linfield to do so, we need to figure out how to get around that. So that's where I'm headed. Thank you.
Councilor O'Neill.
Through you, Mr. President. Yeah, no, it's a great question about the planning board. I know some of the abutters that were directly near that proposed site were very concerned. One of the things I did do this week was called the town manager, Mr. Dolan, who's new in the position, and suggested that, whatever happens at that site, that we have a little more discussion, especially as it may concern water rights or access that way, but also just making sure that they're good neighbors. We bent this council bent over backwards assisting them in their concerns about the medical marijuana facilities. So he was agreeable to that, and I also have a call into the chairman of the Board of Selectmen making that point too. Thank you.
Thank you much, Councilor O'Neill.
Councilman McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. No motions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Co-motion with Councilor Mitsoulas to remove the handicap parking signs at two locations, Tim, 32 Union Street and 53 Harris Street. So moved, please.
You heard,
We're going to rescind the ordinance.
Yes, please.
you heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Gould.
I'd like to remind everybody out in public that tickets are, I believe, Councilor Gravel, still on sale if they want to come to the Legacy Award, which has become the showcase of our Peabody Education Foundation. We honor, as Councilor Gravel has let everyone know, we honor some folks every year. So they can call Gravock or Mary here at, or what's the best way for folks?
So the best way to get tickets now is to go online at peabodyedfoundation.org and click on I'd like to attend, and you can pay and process right there online. Right now it looks like we have a little over 200 people attending the event. We have a good class of candidates, so thank you for the reminder.
Thank you very much, Councilor. And also I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Kathy and Dave Gravel for all the great work that they do in the community. They're being honored tomorrow night at the NASCAP Gala. And Dave, you just continue to set the bar for all of us. And as a colleague and a friend, I want to thank you for everything you do for the community, and Kathy. So thank you. No further motions, Mr. President.
Councilor Sasslaw.
Yes, under suspension of rules, I'd like to make a motion. Department of Public Services replaced the curbing at the corner of Helen and Gooddale Street that was wiped out during this past winter season.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Also like to make a motion that Department of Public Services put a berm in at 12 George Street.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
I'd like to make a motion that Department of Public Services repaint the crosswalks at the, between Lieutenant Ross Park and West Church.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And also that the Department of Public Services repaint the crosswalks at the intersection of Johnson and Lowell Street.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And then I just had one question on 7-8, the transfer of funds regarding the golf course. I'm looking for some of my senior members. I see that they're requesting this for funds. The thing that I found strange is that the start date, they're requesting $15,000 for a study of the golf course and of the operations. But the start date of the contract is May 1st. The completion date is June 1st. I assume this would go to the Finance Committee. And so I'm just kind of scratching my head saying, so, you know, what's up, number one? And number two, I would have liked to have seen maybe more than one, bid for this project. So maybe through the chair to the finance chair, who's been around for a long time, any comments on that or any?
No, I'd like to hear about that too, so that's why we're going to refer it.
Great. Okay, thank you, appreciate it. No further motions.
Counselor, did you make a motion to refer? Or?
I'm going to let the chairman of the finance receive it and put it in his committee.
Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, much as we had discussed just briefly earlier, along the lines as the effort that Councilor O'Neill is putting in, I'd like to make a motion to have respectfully request the chair of our planning board, is that Tom Betancourt, Mr. Betancourt, reach out to his counterpart in Linfield to open lines of communication so that our planning board could be advised, since they are the ones that should have received a notice if Linfield follows the same type of rules that we do. So I guess I'd like to ask Mr. Betancourt if they received one and make a motion to ask him to reach out to the planning board if he hasn't, and open a line of communication so that we are notified for the abutters. And then in that respect, when Mr. Betancourt does receive something, that he would forward along, that he would know that the council wants to know, and forward it along to the council. So I know that's kind of a wordy motion, but I think you get the gist.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Is a vote. Anything else? Councilor Rosenau.
No motions.
Councilor Turco.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, under suspension of the rules, move to receive a late communication from Mayor Betancourt regarding the 14 grant location petitions for Verizon Wireless.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, on that note, in that same letter, the mayor requested, and actually I'll make a motion at my request to set up an executive session regarding the Verizon cell phone tower lawsuits.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, move to receive under suspension of the rules another letter from Mayor Betancourt regarding the marijuana. What is this? There you go. The host agreements for the two medical marijuana facilities on Route 1.
Heard the motion. All in favor?
Mr. Chairman, on that late communication, why are we receiving it? Why do we need to? We've received 3 late communications this evening. 2 of them, I didn't even read that one. So we're receiving it. It's going to be put into, where's it going?
Councilor Sasslaw, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Through you to the chair. So, Councilor Manning, I believe, and I didn't discuss this, but where the clock is ticking for the hearings for the medicinal marijuana, was expressed to me through the mayor was that rather than have both parties come in, they want to get the host agreement out. They feel that they want to get it done. He wants to get it done. And what happens is, I made a motion at the last meeting that once the host agreement is by each party, they finalize it, that we as a council get to look at it. So I think from a time point of view, he wanted to send out, rather than have a meeting and have them come in, he chose to send a letter to both attorneys for both parties that they could then submit their host agreement for negotiation and finalization, so that we then as a council could get it. Also, just for in interest of transparency, he's put a committee together for that on the committee, and chime in if I forget someone, but it's myself, Councilor, obviously the mayor, myself, Councilor Melville, City Solicitor Smazinski, and Sharon Cameron from the Department of Public Health. That's the committee that the mayor has put together. But once again, the purpose of the letter, I think you want us to receive it, just to let the council know that he's sending the letter to the two parties saying, we need the host agreement. Please stop sending in what you'd like to do.
Well, thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for informing me and quite a few of my colleagues that there's been a committee put together that you're aware of, and none of us are. So that's problematic to me. I'm not aware of any committee, and we're attempting to be transparent. It isn't transparent to the rest of the council. This is not directed towards you. I appreciate you sharing the information that you do have. I feel that as well as just a couple of looks I'm getting here now, that the council has been left out of this process, and so I will not be accepting. So I'm objecting, as you know. Late communications have to be unanimous. This one is not unanimous, and I probably will not be receiving any more late communications, because this is the 4th meeting in a row where I've expressed that we should not be. Our rules require that we don't. We've taken votes on that in the past. So I'll be objecting to late communication, and I express umbrage that there's a committee involved in this huge process, that we had all these people here tonight, and we don't even know about it. So maybe I'll read about it in the paper tomorrow. Thank you.
Councilor Lozano. I'm sorry. Now it's Councilor Turco. I went around the board a couple times here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm thinking maybe I should have left that on the desk and so not said anything about that one. But
You should have picked that up 4 meetings ago, but,
okay.
Better late than never.
On that note, we'll leave those over to the side. Back to the Verizon. Tim, I don't know if you fully read the late communication via the mayor for the Verizon issue. That needs to be on the 24th. Okay. And
Yep.
Also for...
The actual petitions will be on the next agenda to be received and scheduled for a hearing.
Thank you. Move to receive item 7D regarding the administrative consent order for 143 Linfield Street.
You heard a motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Mr. President, move under suspension of the rules, move to receive and approve item 8F.
You heard the motion. I'm sorry. You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
And Mr. President, move to have Public Services repair 2 sidewalks, 13 Blair Terrace and 3 Columbia Boulevard.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you. And lastly, it's just informational for the council. The subdivision that we've briefly heard, Attorney Kelty came before us to try to, I guess you'd say, change the inclusionary zoning. That subdivision that he was referencing in that proposed change has come to fruition. So the definitive subdivision plan was submitted to the planning board last week, and That subdivision, just for reference purposes, if you know where the YMCA is, across the street is Ralph Road. Top of Ralph Road becomes Pearl Road. The intention is to blast through Pearl to get to Innis Road, which is off of Bartholomew Street. So the affected areas are pretty wide as far as Ralph Road, Bartholomew Street, Pearl Road, Innis Road. It's a large segment of the population. And last May, we had a brief meeting, introductory meeting to this whole project. I think Council Melville was there at the time. It was upwards of 200 people. And I think that it warrants another meeting, which I will organize and invite you all to, just so that you're aware of it. It's scheduled to go before the Planning Board for the public purposes on June 7th. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Council Melville.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move to receive item 8E and request be forwarded to the city auditors for reconsideration. I also last Saturday was the Pride in Peabody Day. I want to thank all those folks that came out, especially councilors. I was with Councilor McGinn, and it was an experience. I thought I knew Ward 2 growing up there, but I found places I didn't go before. But I just would like to request that for folks to know that there's many other fellow citizens are out there. They're cleaning up, and sometimes they're cleaning up after their fellow residents. So it's something to be said for those. I saw some folks just walking up and down their streets when they saw us, being motivated to go out and inspired to go out to clean up their streets. So I would like to request, especially for all those watching at home, or they're going to hear about this, is think about, just take a look at and take pride in your street where you live. If you just take care of your area, then that helps everybody else, and it inspires others, and it only helps going forward with your neighbors. So that would just be a request I would have for my fellow residents going forward. And I have no other motions at this time. Thank you.
Council Gravel.
On the suspension of rules, I'd like to receive 7A, B, C, E, F, and G, and refer them to the Finance Committee.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
I'd also like to make a motion to request that the mayor advise us as to whether or not he would entertain a request for proposal from the Edward J. Collins Jr. Center for Public Management on the issue of charter reform. So moved.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
No further motions.
Is there, Council Gravel, is there any other, would you like to take 9 and 10?
We need to do 8A.
8A first, Council Gravel.
Move to receive.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
9A junk dealer's license renewal for 2018, Newbury Comics 210 Andover Street, Golden Link 515 Lowell Street. Move to receive and approve, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
9B taxi limousine driver's license, Louis A. Dume, license number 60. Move to receive and approve, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Item 10A, ready for council adoption, is an ordinance amending section 19-126, obedience to isolated stop signs of the code of the city of Peabody. Move to receive and approve, subject and approve as advertised. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Item 10B, ready for council adoption in an ordinance amending section 19-96.2, 15-minute zones designated Monday through Sunday of the Code of the City of Peabody. Move to receive and approve as advertised. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Move to adjourn.
Nope. I'm sorry, Councilor. I have a couple motions.
Go for it.
I'd like to make a motion to ask for a stop sign at Fairmont and Buttonwood Lane and advertise. So move. Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Also have a motion to repair and replace the existing stop sign at the intersection of Buttonwood and Barrett So move. You heard all in favor, any opposed? It's a vote. And also to ask PMLP to remove the tandem pole on Fairmount, next to the stop sign. You heard the motion, all in favor, any opposed? Any opposed? It's a vote. I asked the building commissioner to change or add to the ordinance. I'm not sure of the number. I'm sure he will be able to pull it up for me. In the ordinance, it says any new buildings, houses to be built, to have a concrete-like sidewalk. What I would like to have, scratch the like part and have a concrete and granite curb. I think, Councilor O'Neill, you would appreciate this with some more subdivisions going on in your neighborhood, and also Councilor Turkle, that they're not just adding, a pavement on a sidewalk and a pavement curb, as we've been replacing many of these throughout the night tonight, that any new builds have a concrete sidewalk with a granite curb. Hear the motion? Any all in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. I also like to ask the DPW to address the issues they've brought up once before, and it's the added on left-hand turns on such streets. You'll see it going east to west on Lowell Street to Forest. You'll see cars pulling over to the right, and left-hand lane is being man-made. There was supposed to be hash marks there. If we could have that done, every day I see someone zipping down, coming as far as down past Jennifer Lane on the left-hand side. If kids are crossing or people coming out between the cars, they're going to get nailed. So if we can create those hash marks at that location, Lowell and Forest, and also at the intersection of Lowell and Endicott, the same thing. We're having cars coming down from Orchard Street and going to the left of the cars going straight. If we can have hash marks, there is a portion of the road when you can do that, but they're taking liberty way too soon in making those turns. All in favor, any opposed? It's a vote. And this, as Councilor Melville had indicated, the cleanup. I just asked members of my ward, when you're walking through Emerson Park and you're enjoying the pathway that goes around the back side of the park, and you're so great at picking up your dog waste and putting them in the loo bags, not to stack them up in a pile in the woods. There had to be 200 bags sitting there, It's great that you pick up the dog waste, but please take it and dump it in a barrel, but don't just pile them up in a pile in the pathway. With that, the last motion is just to wish my daughter Samantha a happy birthday tonight. So move. Adjourn. Make a motion to adjourn?